Attention! At ease, guys. Welcome to another podcast with the one and only Richard Hanson. Today we're honored to have a special guest who has served our country well and is here with us to share about mental toughness. Thank you for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed today's episode. Here's your host, Richard Hanson.
What's up, guys? Super excited to be able to come to you live from the studio. I can think of no other place I'd rather be than right here, right now with you. I've got a super special guest tonight, former frogman, retired Navy SEAL, Patrick Park. Patrick, how you doing?
Oh, doing great. I can't believe I'm actually sitting in here with you two. This is awesome. I never dreamed this would ever come true. But you know something? Dreams are something that will come true so long as you persevere.
You know, Patrick, there's so much that we're going to be able to get into tonight, and I'm sure we're going to have you back on because this is like Pandora's box. Once you open it, it's going to be hard to get it all back in. But, you know, for those that maybe have no idea anything about Navy SEALs, could you just give just a brief explanation on what that is?
Well, Navy SEALs, SEAL stands for sea, air, and land, and that's a means of delivery using whatever vehicle you can use, a submarine, an airplane, or just jumping off the side of a truck or small craft to get into an area that you're supposed to operate in. And I find that having been through the SEAL program, that it has encouraged me to do things that I didn't think were possible in my today's life.
Now, Patrick, how many years were you actually in the SEALs?
Well, I spent 23 years in the Navy and spent most of that with SEAL team units on the East Coast and the West Coast.
Now, I know for those listening, some of you may have served our country, and I just want to say thank you very much for those that have served our country or are currently serving in our armed forces. But I know there's a lot of you out there listening right now that you have no plans to jump out of an airplane. You've got no plans to rush headfirst into battle. You've got no plans to attack an enemy compound. And you may be wondering, why should I be listening to this podcast? Well, here's what I'm going to tell you why you should be listening to it. Because tonight we're going to talk about mental toughness. Because mental toughness is something all of us need to improve on, whether we are serving in the armed forces or whether we are just raising our family or whether we are in the business world. Wherever you find yourself, mental toughness is an area that all of us can develop. And I believe mental toughness can be developed. What do you think, Patrick?
Well, I think it starts early on when you're a young person. You know, we're not all born the same way, or things work out the way they work out because of the environment we're in. I can remember back many years when I wanted to be on a Pop Warner football team. Gosh, you know, that was the one thing I really wanted to do. And in order to join in the team, I needed equipment, which I didn't have. And soon the equipment appeared, and I got out there and knuckled down with the rest of those huge guys. Got run over a few times, but I got up.
You know, I love what you say about equipment, because really what I feel like this podcast is going to accomplish tonight, it's going to give tools, practical tools for people to be equipped in the area of mental toughness.
And then you have to get over a few things like, hey, it's going to hurt, but that's okay. You know, I'm going to hurt somebody else. Ha, 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 ha.
Right. You know, I've heard it said, and correct me if I'm wrong, but 75% of those that go through the initial BUDS training, which is the acronym for Basic Underwater Demolitions, wash out before they even complete the training.
That's true. The class that I was in, there were a great deal of people who rang the bell, simply walked up to the bell, rang it 3 times, threw their helmet on the ground, kicked it a couple times, and walked out the door. They didn't have to worry about the cold swims, the sand all over your body. They didn't have to worry about food or anything, because that was all provided for them. As a matter of fact, they were encouraged to go ahead and ring the bell. At a certain time during the training, the early stages, they try to get the class to dwindle down so that they can get more specific with the lessons that we need to learn in order to go into harm's way.
Now, when you say ring the bell, what are you meaning?
Well, we have a big old brass bell, and it's hanging out at the training unit. See, there's a fella who put it up there, and they've been ringing it ever since. Every time you ring it, people look at the bell to see who is quitting now. There's red helmets, which are enlisted guys, and then there are blue helmets, which are the officers. And you'd be surprised, the ratio is about the same.
Wow. It's like so many people in life, I think we choose to opt out of businesses, we choose to opt out of relationships, we choose to opt out of a lot of different things and ring that bell.
Yeah, we call that being a little short-fused. In other words, you're not in there for the length. You're in there just to enjoy the good things that happen in the beginning of the relationship or the job or whatever it is that you're trying to undertake. That isn't life's ideal. Ideal is to go with the program. If you have to suffer a little bit, no problem. I mean, I've been in a couple of situations where I wasn't real pleased with the way I was being paid or treated, and the idea there was just to relax, follow the lead, try to make things better, and pull somebody along with me.
Winston Churchill said it best, if you're going through hell, keep going. And I think that goes for a lot of where we are in life sometimes. We're going to go through those ups and downs. And just like in the SEALs basic training, that hell week where they go through that intense 7 days of absolute hell, where many of them are just encouraged to give up. But yet there's a small percentage of those men who actually persevere through those 7 days.
What they're looking for is to find out where the individual's plateau is. Where is the plateau that says, hey, I'm not taking any more of this, I'm out of here? The people that find their plateau are usually those sailors that are on those big haze gray things that get underway from one port to another. In other words, they go to shipboard duty. The other fellas, where they don't find their plateau, they're still over there serving at SEAL teams.
So you think that once we come to the end of ourselves and hit that plateau, that there is still more in us that we don't realize?
You don't. A lot of people quit too early. I don't think there is a business, a relationship, or something that you enjoy doing, like when you fellas are going to go take off on a long walk tomorrow, carrying a big old 30-pound rucksack. That's strenuous. Now, my thoughts are this. Are you going to be able to make it the entire length of the march, or are you just going to quit halfway?
I think the important thing to realize is once you lay your hand to something, the intention is to follow it through. But so many people don't have the intentions of following through.
Well, there's a lot of men out there, and women, and kids too, who they want the frills. They all want all the glory and everything, and they're not willing to put in the time or the effort in order to make something happen. In all of our professions, you've got to put in the time. You've got to learn how the business works from the basics so that you can contribute to that man's company.
One of the things that I was studying before we did this podcast tonight is some different areas or pillars of mental toughness. And I want to just dive into just a few of these tonight that somebody practically could hear this and begin to apply this immediately to their life. And the first one that I want to talk about is goal setting. I think for a lot of us that are listening tonight, we have trouble setting goals in following through with those goals. And I know on the missions that you have been on and the training that you've endured, if you didn't have goals, manageable goals, if you were to take the whole mission, it would be so overwhelming that why even try?
Yeah, there's a lot of goal setting. I personally can remember times when my back hurt. I didn't want to go for that long run, but I knew that that was the next evolution. And I would tell myself, hey, if you can just get through this evolution, the next one's going to be easier. Well, I was kidding myself because it got more and more difficult. But that's okay, because what it taught me was, 1, to be patient, 2, to look ahead, and 3, don't ever quit. I saw a picture not long ago on a shirt that kind of says it all. It's a picture of a white herring, and he's trying to gulp down this frog. Well, the frog's head's inside the bird's mouth, and his right front paw, or whatever you want to call it, is around the bird's neck, squeezing off so the bird can't swallow him. Don't ever quit. No matter what you're doing, no matter how difficult it is, seek advice, go on. I mean, there are lots of folks that have huge businesses, like, for instance, Mr. Kroc, Ray Kroc. He stepped out. He took a huge step, and he did very well. All the McDonald's restaurants, what are there, 3,500 of them now throughout the world? He did a great job. Why can't I do that? There's no reason I can't. All I've got to do is visualize it and then go get it.
And I think what you're saying is so true. All of us have 24 hours in a day, but it's how we choose to break down that 24 hours that separates the average from the uncommon. And the thing that I love about you and that I respect about the SEAL community is their ability to look at the overall objective, whether that was when they went in to capture bin Laden. They had to have that strategy broken down piece by piece.
Yes, that's correct. We would perform one task at a time leading up to the grand finale, or the last moments before we went in to get the fella. So this is what we did. We'd start at the very basics, and the basics were, how are we going to get out of the helicopter? So we'd go jump in and out of the helicopter 4 or 5 times, or maybe even 10 times, until everyone knew exactly where they were seated, exactly what the equipment on their bodies could get hung up on the way out. Everything was just precise. And then the next evolution would be moving from the helicopter to the building. There's several ways of doing it, but we wanted to make sure that we were away from light, so that we were walking in the shadows. And then once we got to the doors, we wanted to know, does that doorknob turn to the right to open or to the left? We needed to know that to save us time and keep from alerting the folks that were on the other side of the door. We needed to know how many stories there were, how many steps in each flight of stairs. Everything was broken down to the simplest. And then we'd practice it. And as we practice it, we'd add more to it. And then, what operation will happen, or maybe there's something strange will happen during the period of the operation, and here's what we do. We brainstorm it. What if we can't get in the door? What if we can't get up the stairs? What's our alternative direction? I can remember back in Vietnam when I was an active SEAL, what if one of us get hurt? Okay, what do we do? What's the procedures for getting him out of there? What if these people don't come? Do we just sit around and wait, or we go someplace else and sit down and wait? What happens? There's always a contingent plan to anything that we do.
And I think that's why it's so important to pay attention to details. The small things matter. Because oftentimes it's the small things that can disrupt a larger operation. And one of the things I've heard that SEALs do is they visualize success. Yeah. They visualize the mission even before they're ever going to do the mission. Can you kind of explain a little bit what that would look like?
Yeah. But prior to the operation and during the process of working through the events of the operation, we would look at each other and say, we can do this. We can do this. And we said we didn't say I, which promoted a lot of camaraderie within the group. We can do this, right? Yeah, we can do it. Okay, how are we going to do it? Well, let's think about it. So we'll brainstorm the situation and then have a plan, and then, of course, have that contingency that I just spoke about.
Because it takes teamwork to make the dream work.
That's right. We. Just like a marriage. Some of the guys that I served with, I still correspond with. I still see them about once a year at the reunions. I still write them emails. I still laugh at them. I still look at them and make a comment like, boy, you sure are getting old. That last picture was terrible. Did you get a full night's sleep or what?
During some of the SEAL training and this whole thing with mental toughness, a lot of the training was done underwater. And while they were underwater, often the instructors would come and they would begin to pull off their equipment and try to...
the pool harassment phase.
Yeah, the whole harassment phase. And the thing that I was learning as I was researching this is that those that would succeed during these kinds of underwater training were those that visually saw themselves to the finish, visually saw themselves succeed even before they went to do the underwater training.
Well, the underwater training is something that helps you build confidence in your ability to survive. Yeah, they'd strap on a couple twin 72s on your back, which are darn heavy. And we go down to the bottom of the pool, whatever the depth was, and the instructors would come over and rip your face mask off. And they'd put it someplace on the bottom of the pool. Then when they'd take your regulator out of your mouth and tie a knot in it and stick it behind your back, the backside of your head where you can't see or even reach it for that matter, and then they'll turn your air off. Whoa, wait a minute. They're going to turn my air off? That's my lifeline to success. What am I going to do then? Well, very simple. If you get down there and you lose it, you get frightened, you're going to lose it. You're going to have a difficult time. If you get down on the bottom and you just think, well, let's see now, he ripped it off to my right, so it should be someplace over to my right, my face mask. I know he's going to tie my regulator knots, and I know he's going to put it in the back where I can't reach it, so I'm going to have to reach, maybe unbuckle my rig so I can tilt it and reach back and grab it, and then take the knot out and stick it in my mouth and continue breathing while I look for my fins that he took, or my K-bar knife, which is a frogman's only survival weapon in the surf zone. Yeah, you think about it. You visualize exactly where it is, and then you go get it.
Some of you may be listening tonight and say, Richard, Patrick, I think everything that you're saying is absolutely wonderful. But the reality is I'm not going to find myself at the bottom of some pool having some instructor trying to rip off my face mask.
Well, I got the answer to that one. Don't go to Bud's training.
But for many of you listening, you're going to be at times pulled underwater in your relationships, pulled underwater in your business, pulled underwater by uncertainties of things that are happening in the world. And it may seem as if everybody is trying to take off your mask and trying to finish you off. And the reality is during those times that you're going to have to fight. You're going to have to visualize yourself succeeding and getting through. Though you may feel that you are walking through the valley of the shadow of death, when you begin to visualize that God has brought you there, not to destroy you, but to push you into a greater depth, a breakthrough in your life, then you'll begin to see that in the midst of the mess, God is making a message. In the middle of the test, God is forming a testimony in your life. And it's important that we visualize and mentally see ourselves the way He sees us. And that is one of experiencing a blessed life. One of the other things that I want to talk to you about is this idea that oftentimes we got to convince ourselves that we can do something.
Sometimes that's the most difficult part. Yeah, sure, I can do that. I can jump over that little small stream. And you stand on the other side of the bank and you leap and you find yourself right in the middle of the stream. Oh my God. Now wait a minute. If I had thought about it, I could have backed up a few steps, get a good running start, push off from the bank and get over the small stream. And that's the way it is in life. I mean, look at your relationship with your wife. Sometimes it's terrific and sometimes it's not so terrific. But those not so terrific times teach you how to make your marriage more terrific. I find the same instance in church. There are plenty of people who come to church that have a story, and I like listening to them. And once in a great while, I can compare their story with mine and tell them what I did or how I handled that, and then see what happens.
This whole idea of convincing ourselves is what separates the boys from the men during Bud's training. If you look at those that have graduated from the Bud's training, it were those that learned to block out the negative self-talk and constantly motivate themselves that they have within themselves to do whatever it is that they are required to do. And I find out that sometimes the greatest person that I need to preach to is myself.
Do you know, have you ever, I've seen this with you on the podium, and the first couple of times I came to the church, I sort of sat back in my seat and gave it a good hard look. But in the last two services we've had, you have matured incredibly. And I'm just hoping that every man in that arena can mature like you did. You've come up with some fantastic sermons. There's a couple that I really liked, but I'll leave that for the listeners to go ahead and look it up on the internet.
But the idea is success in any arena doesn't come overnight. I mean, just because we see somebody crowned in business, crowned in ministry, crowned in a relationship, whatever it may be, when we look at them and say, that is what I would see as success, what we need to understand is those were years in the making of long hours, hard work, times when they were ready to throw in the towel and give up, but yet it was in those darkest moments that they convinced themselves that they could do it. Think about if Albert Einstein would have gave up after the 1000th time of failing to make the light bulb. Where would we be today? But because he had this insane, insatiable hunger to push past the limits of what he thought was in himself, we are now enjoying his creation of the light bulb. And I think about how much is in us if we were just to convince ourselves that there is more in us. What is humanly possible, so to speak, in the coming days as we push ourselves in these areas of mental toughness?
It's hard to say. I advocate that the human spirit's capable of doing anything. All you have to do is put your mind to it, get your heart into it, and get moving.
One of the other things that I was looking at is this whole thing about controlling our arousal. And what do I mean by that is, during in times of intense training, intense stress, intense fear that may be creeping in from whatever plurality of areas and causing chemicals in our body to produce anxiety or fear, or cause our heart to pound or our minds to race, is we have to learn to control those areas of arousal.
You mean the endorphins?
The endorphins.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something. The best way to understand your personal feelings is to get yourself in a situation where, oh my God, I got to jump over this little stream here. I'm afraid that I'll trip and hurt myself or break an ankle or something. You have to dispense with those. And what I'm saying to you is this: you practice, which brings character to you, and most important, confidence to overcome any object in front of you.
Because the body's natural response to stress or danger is to release this rush of cortisol and all of these harmful chemicals to cause our body to malfunction. But if you're going to be a SEAL, if you're going to be successful in life, then we have to be poised under these kind of arenas of stressful situations.
Well, it's like you said a little earlier, when these things come up in your business or your relationship, you've got to know how to deal with them. And you have to do it in a very calm manner. It's just like a person who gets all upset and starts screaming and hollering and gets very aggressive, or the other person who's kind of numb to the whole thing. Instead of being aggressive, he's just going to be assertive verbally. Rather than being physical, do it verbally. And this works real well in just about every arena.
So do you believe that you can actually control your body's response to danger?
I think so, yes. I hope, yeah, I do. I've been shot at many times on the battlefield. I've been rewarded for that. That's another story. At a later date, we'll go into that one. But at any rate, yeah. When the bullets start flying, what are you going to do? Are you going to go jump in a hole and cover yourself up? No. My idea is to go forth and find out where they're coming from and then eliminate that problem.
Well, that's what you said about SEALs. If you want to know who would qualify to be on the SEALs, it would be somebody that when the bullets start flying, they're not running away, but they are standing up and charging towards the bullets. Now, how would that relate to if in business, when your business is on the verge of going bankrupt, instead of you running away and giving up, you jumped up and ran and attacked the problem that was causing your business to fail? Or what about in a relationship when somebody on the other party is ready to walk out on you? Instead of running away and just throwing in the towel, you rise up and begin to attack that relationship to begin to make it succeed. Things happen if we will just begin to attack the problem instead of allowing the problem to attack us.
Yeah. The solution is the important part of that. Find the solution and then move towards it. Attack it, if you will. But it's easier if you just sneak up on it and solve the problem. It seems to make your spouse a little happier anyway.
It's like being proactive. I can't tell you how many times I tell men, be proactive in your relationship. Be proactive in your business. Be proactive with your health, because there's going to come a day that you're going to have a 911 situation. And what are you going to do about it when the spouse walks out? What are you going to do about it when the doctor says you have cancer? What are you going to do about it when you lose your job? And if we will just be proactive, we will begin to attack our problems. If we'll just become aware of it. I mean, just look around you. Every single day, people have their heads buried in their phones. And often one of the things about mental toughness is we got to learn just to be aware of our surroundings.
Yeah, the environment is incredible. There's a lot of, if you will, my wife keeps saying, the devil's out there, be careful. And she's right at every turn. So you do have to be careful, mindful of where you're going, what you're doing, what are you saying to people, how you affect other people in their lives. Yeah, he's out there. Just be careful.
It's just being aware. It's just lifting your head up to look around, to be aware of your surroundings, to be aware of what is going on around you. It's like the ostrich with its head in the sand. And there are things happening in the world right now that you and I need to pull our head out of the sand and begin to look up and begin to see what's going on so that we can begin to avoid some of the bad stuff that the enemy and our enemies in the nations have planned against us.
Sometimes, especially during this time of the season, we have a little problem with, there's some Russians that were accused of listening to some message and what have you. But I find that if you look at the situation as a whole and practice humility in that situation, it goes a lot further than trying to demand or push or even in some cases false advertise.
I think it just boils down to practicing avoidance.
Yep.
You know, as a SEAL, in a lot of people's minds, they would see that person as somebody who's just out to attack and to destroy and to kill. But the reality is, because of their training, they are aware of their surroundings, and because of that, they avoid some of the stuff that other people may not see for the purpose of just not being caught up in uneventful situations.
Yeah, one of the things that made us successful in the Vietnam era was the fact that we would do what we call a listening post. We're just going to go out there and sit, and we're going to watch. We're going to try to figure out what's going on by the traffic in the area, and then we'll make an operation based on the facts that we have. Yeah, pretty much. So try to size your enemy up before you face him.
I think it's like David and Goliath. I mean, we've got this big guy out there mocking an entire army and bringing an entire army and rendering it useless. But yet there was something about David in his spirit. I kind of would imagine if David was alive today, he probably would be in the Buds training that incited David that this giant, this situation, this circumstance was defying what he knew.
Well, look at him. I mean, he went out there with a couple of ropes and something that would hold a rock, and he kicked sand and soil around a little bit, and a few pieces of dust flopped up, and he grabbed a hold of a rock, and he backed off a little bit, and he took a look at his enemy. He swirled that thing around over his head, and then he let one of the ropes go, and by golly, it struck him right in the forehead in the center. Yeah, yeah.
You know, sometimes we just have to take what's in our hand. It may just be a few stones, but whatever God has placed in our hands potentially has the ability to strike down those very things that stand before us. And oftentimes we have no realization of what those are unless we have somebody around us like those instructors at times doing things that cause us to be uncomfortable, but it's not because they don't like us, it's because they see more in us than what's presently being realized. And because they put a demand on us, we're able to go beyond plateaus where we thought we could never go beyond.
You know, sometimes in the military especially, they'll say, well, that's a rule, and that rule was made with a pen that had blood in it. Someone died so that we could continue on. It's amazing. I look back on my military life, and I'm extremely happy that I had the opportunity to serve the United States. And I'm extremely friendly to anyone in any service who comes alongside and says, hey, listen, I was in the Army, I was in the Marine Corps. Well, wow, man, that's terrific. You know, I don't intentionally let people know what I did until they ask. And I find the brotherhood amongst most military guys is still very tight. I don't care what service you were in. It doesn't make any difference. The fact is that you stood up, you faced the enemy, you won, you're back here. In life, every day you do the same thing. You stand up, face the enemy, and keep marching on.
And those are the kind of people that I want to be around. People that are willing to get in the foxhole with me. People that are willing to take a bullet for me. You know, the thing that I realize when I've talked with men that have served our country is oftentimes during some of the wars, men would get shot, but because they were, maybe it was the pride, or maybe it was they just didn't want to show any sign of weakness, they would go off into the woods and they would bleed out. And I think, wow, you know, how important it is for us to have that kind of brotherhood, that we can be real when we've taken a shot, when we've gotten hurt, when something hasn't gone our way. If we would just take off the mask and be real, what could begin to happen in our lives?
I think we'd find a lot more rewards than what we're receiving at this time. And if you're the type of individual that likes to surround himself with people like that, I'm sure you're going to find your way through life much easier than those who try to fight it.
That's why I think we need those mentors, those instructors.
Yeah. I had a mentor years ago at a church that I attended, and he was the head usher. I watched that guy. I learned from him. He was perfect, and I wanted to be just like that guy. And over the years, here I find myself in a church being an usher. And it's a familiar position, and I enjoy it, and I'm hoping that the people that I'm serving, including the Lord, see that. I want them to see it in my actions, not my verbs, not my nouns, not my speech at all. I want to see if they can pick up on the action.
Because I believe there are two ways that we can learn. One is we can be taught something, but what we're talking about tonight really is something that you catch. And I hope that those that are listening tonight are catching something that is being said. That's why it's so important that we have somebody that's pouring into us as a mentor, but then also we have somebody that we are pouring into.
You know, a lot of times the subordinates are those people that we sort of take on responsibility. I went to a Bible study a couple days ago, and one of the fellows was having some health issues. I don't know why, but when he walked in, I picked up on something. And as I spoke with the guy, I realized he'd had some injuries that weren't healing well enough. And I gave him my name, my telephone number, and my email address, and told him, hey, you know something? I'd like to talk with you a little bit more about this. Please give me a call or drop me an email when you have a little bit of time. If not, I'll see you in church on Sunday. Maybe we can talk a little bit there. I'd like to mentor to that young man. I'd like to be able to show him things he's never seen before and how God works.
And a lot of that is because you have a heart to pour into the next generation.
Well, if this generation doesn't do that, unfortunately, as we keep going through life, things are going to get worse. We need to stop it now. We need to get in there and give what we can to that generation coming up. I know a lot of times I ask the pastor, hey, I'm not too sure whether the message I was trying to explain came across well. What do you think? And he's always standing there with his hand on my back saying, wow, that was great. Do it again. Well, that encourages me just to work a little bit harder.
Right. Now, Patrick, for those that are listening tonight, how old are you?
70.
Would you say that you're some of the last remaining of the SEALs in that era?
Yeah, I would say that. I would definitely say that.
So I think there's a lot that we could learn from you, because truly I've heard it said that was some of the greatest generation that ever lived. And I think there's some things in that generation that needs to be extracted if we, as this new generation, are going to be successful in these areas of life.
Be strong, be confident.
Patrick, I appreciate you coming tonight, and I know this is something that we are going to continue to dive into underwater and allow things that need to be said be said. But I want to just ask you this question as we close tonight. When we were in a leadership meeting several nights ago, I asked the men there something that I want to ask you. If you were to die today, what is one value that you would want to be known for?
I'd like for my boys, I have 3 boys and a daughter, I'd like for my children to know who their dad was. I would like to be able to help someone better their life doing whatever it is that they do. I'd like to set an example for the generations coming that it's okay to help one another.
So guys, listen. If you're listening to this right now and you're hearing this for the first time, here are some of the things I want you to walk away with tonight. Number 1, mental toughness is something that can be developed. Just because you may be born and you may not feel like you are a natural leader doesn't mean that you can't go and train in these areas of mental toughness. Because let's be real, the battle is in the mind. And he that controls the mind controls the individual. Second thing is I want you to understand walking away from tonight is that you've got to begin to set some goals. And they need to be big goals, big dreams, but yet you've got to have micro-manageable chunks out of that big dream that you can actually visually see yourself accomplishing it. Because visualization, as we talked about tonight, seeing yourself do something is so important. The next one is sometimes you're going to just have to convince yourself that you can do it. Maybe nobody else in your family believes that you can accomplish that dream that God has put in your heart. But you, through Christ, can do all things as he strengthens you. Next thing you need to understand is sometimes you're going to have to control your thought life. You're going to have to control those areas in your mind that want to arouse fear and anxiety and cause this overload of chemicals in your body, that you can truly control those areas of your body where you are truly walking in peace day in and day out. The next thing is you've got to just be aware. Sometimes it's as simple as putting your phone down and having a blackout and just being aware of what's around you. Be present in the moment. Don't let this day pass you by. And you also got to learn to avoid the bad stuff. There is so much out there that wants to destroy your life, and it's so easy to get caught up in it. So learn to avoid the bad stuff in life. You've also got to practice humility, because it takes teamwork to make the dream work. None of us have it all figured out, and we can't always rely on what we are feeling or thinking. That's why we need people around us. That's why we need mentors. That's why we need coaches and instructors that will come around us and at times make us uncomfortable, but because of those feelings of being uncomfortable, we're able to access a part of us that we never realized we could access. So my friends, from my heart to yours, I love each and every one of you. Thank you so much for listening to tonight's podcast. From my heart to yours, much love.
Well, that's it for today's episode. Thanks for listening, and please stay tuned for more to come.